and college admissions. The lawsuit brought by a group of Asian American students. Lower courts have ruled in favor of the university's affirmative action programs in the past. Former President Trump has asked the Supreme Court to block congressional access to his tax records, saying they're being sought with no legitimate legislative purpose. A state judge in North Dakota has ruled the state's ban on abortion cannot take effect for now.
North Dakota's Attorney General says the state's abortion law should be allowed to take effect while the lawsuit involving the state's only abortion clinic plays out. Initially, Judge Bruce Romanek said no, the law could not remain in effect for now, so the Attorney General went to the state Supreme Court. The High Court said Romanek should take another look, that he'd not fully considered the chances of the Red River Clinic succeeding with the lawsuit. Romanek again rejected the request Monday, and his earlier ruling had said assessing the clinic's chances of succeeding would force him to weigh in without hearing arguments from both sides. The state law bans all abortions except in cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
No, you did not win $1 billion in Monday night's Powerball jackpot, but then nobody else did either. The jackpot for the drawing on Wednesday night grows to $1,200 million. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Reggae in Paradise. Let's vibe out to some of the hottest Irie vibes on all your playlists. Join the vibes on November 19th at Paseo Stadium. It's on a Saturday and we have an amazing lineup of artists. Mix Plate, Bubba B, Fantasia, The John Dank Show, Kimmy A. Minor, Lickle Jordy, High Water, and Rebel Sojas. Get your tickets now at guamtime.net. What are you waiting for? Presenting sponsors, big thanks to Riga Royal, IT&E, White Claw, GVB, Gasolina, Linda's Diner, and Empire Media and Entertainment. Saturday, November 19th, Reggae in Paradise. We'll see you there.
Kona Brewing Company, Wenti Vineyards, and First Hawaiian Bank presents internationally renowned slack key master, Ledward Ka'apana. Ledward Ka'apana, founding member of the legendary Hawaiian music group Hui Ohana, joined Grammy-nominated and multiple Nahoku Hanohano Award winner Ledward Ka'apana for 2 magical nights.
Saturday, November 12th, the Tsubaki Tower, doors open at 6 p.m. And Sunday, November 13th, the Hotel Nico Guam, doors open at 5 p.m. Tickets are available at Ambrose and at the door. $40 in advance and $50 at the door.
Slack Key Master Ledward Ka'apana, live on Guam, Saturday, November 12th and Sunday, November 13th.
Presented by Kona Brewing Company, Wenti Vineyards, and First Hawaiian Bank. Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting, The Point, Star 101, and Boss 104.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I start the show that way every day because it puts you on notice as to what goes on here. This is a constitutionally oriented, freedom-worshiping, conservative call-in talk show. If you're interested in those kinds of things, conservatism, freedom, the Constitution, you're in the right place. And if you're not interested in those things, you're really in the right place. So let us begin. Today is the 1st of November, and as is the usual custom here on Tall Tales, I'm going to read the rules of engagement. I do it every first of the month, because during a particular month, there may be new tailgaters that have come aboard and might understand all of the intricacies and nuances of the show. So I go through this, and for you old-timers, well, it's kind of interesting also. So here's how it goes. Listen to the radio talkers, read the blogs and blog comments in the paper, check out the conversations in the bars and coffee shops, and it soon becomes apparent that answers are often more abundant than questions concerning the important issues of the day. One of the functions of Tall Tales will be to state the questions for the answers that many seem so sure of, and then respond to those questions. Here are some of the answers that will be dealt with in the coming weeks, not necessarily in the order of their occurrence or importance. You can carry a gun anywhere at any time. We're second-class citizens. There should be term limits on senators. The feds stole Fenadam from us. Now, there are 24 of these going all the way down to political signs should be posted on private property only. And number 24, there's no competition in the price of gasoline on Guam. So we can discuss any one of those. I seldom get to those because currency is part and parcel of this show. We pick on stuff that's breaking right now, even though some of these subjects have been around for quite some time. Now, there are 24 default topics. If I ever run out of something to talk about, I can always go to one of these default topics. But then there are three, a 0, double 0, and triple 0, that are always in play. Double 0, a 0 goes like this. Bob doesn't know what he's talking about. You can feel free to call in and say, Bob doesn't know what he's talking about. And then double 0, Bob still doesn't know what he's talking about. And triple 0, Bob still don't know Jack. That would be Drive-Through Jack, of course, and I do know Drive-Through Jack. He's a pretty regular participant in the show. So we go on. The list is not to suggest that there aren't plenty of other interesting questions or answers to take up every day. There are, and they can be addressed. Usually serious and sometimes humorous, Tall Tales will examine current events, government and politics, and occasionally drift into history, culture, religion, law, and once in a great, great while, but only very, very cautiously, rumors and gossips. Tall Tales is structured, but can often entertain whatever callers want to discuss. It's a matter of timing. You know, if you call in between items on the card, oftentimes I can accommodate you. I don't want to stop in midstream and divert to a different subject. Tall Tales is an issue-driven, fact-oriented, interactive talk show that invites audience participation. It's been the top-rated FM afternoon show in Micronesia. The Point is Pika's best radio station for 2022. Next subject, facts, no-nos. They say, oh, everybody knows that. Well, we've always done it that way. There's no doubt in my mind. No! How about a little analysis and some critical thinking? So, don't call up and preface your call by saying, Bob, everybody knows that. Fill in the blank. That won't work very well. Don't look for an abundance of common sense on Tall Tales. I'm going to repeat that. Don't look for an abundance of common sense on Tall Tales. Now, people always think, oh, yeah, it's just common sense. But I'm here to rebut that. Your common sense is what tells you that the world is flat, that iron ships could never float, and that an object that is heavier than air could never fly. Well, of course, common sense is to be valued, but not when it's a synonym for reverence for the status quo or timidity. While an instant and firm grasp of the obvious may occasionally be necessary, sometimes it's good to delve into the theoretical and occasionally examine the what-ifs. Common sense, or call it common sense, if it is, right, Tom? Let's argue without being argumentative. Let's disagree without being disagreeable. Let's not play pin the tail on the talk show host. Caveat: look for provocative content on Tall Tales. Tall Tales thrives on disagreement. It's not my job to get everybody singing from the same sheet of music and, all living happily ever after, mumbling, enough every time we take a step. That's not Tall Tales. We thrive on disagreement. It's an interactive show that invites audience participation. It has been the top-rated show in Micronesia. Uusa dos na lengguahe ifinul English dan ifinul tomorrow loqui gi programahu. Ike programata. Guahu idonmizu hos jan butlon kasi frihon jan natselikju. Tall Tales is the name, so look out for tongue-in-cheek aspects of the show and listen for Jose's horn. Yeah, sometimes my dry, understated sense of humor doesn't get the laughs it should. So the tip-off is Jose. If I'm being facetious, exaggerating, being a punster, whatever, you'll hear from Jose. Sit back and enjoy Zemi Ikotny, the boxing card, the big halftime show, the seventh inning stretch directly from Wrigley Field, and the home stretch from Churchill Downs. My job is to make the complex understandable and, if possible, interesting. Sometimes we comfort the afflicted. Sometimes we afflict the comfortable. Tall Tales is interactive, but no soapboxes allowed. No filibusters. No pin the tail on the talk show host either, nor hostile takeovers. You got to remember, I'm the host. Your humble, self-effacing, ever-modest host is supported by the Tall Tales think tank, to include the Tall Tales think tank foreign policy guru, a constitutional law and organic act expert, a research survey and statistic bureau, and now a script writer for the 19th floor. Yeah, so that's what it's about. We do this, this pretty much the routine, day in, day out on Tall Tales, but the variations in the show are astronomical because the subject matter is dynamic, and we're always picking up on what's breaking here in our local community. Okay, next I go to Zemi Ikotny, and once again, by way of explanation, Zemi Ikotny is my bilingual backwards play on words. Literally, Zemi Ikotny means press the meat. I turn it around so that it means meet the press. It's like PMSNBC, it's only better. In the beginning, I would go through the editorials for each of the two papers with my blue pencil, highlight the grammatical and usage errors, the faulty theories, whatever. And if there were a better of the two, that one would get the coveted blue star. I've really been economizing on blue ink for a long, long time. Back during its Gannett days, the Daily News almost never wrote an editorial. Once they got shed of Gannett, the situation didn't improve much. They write about one editorial every 6 weeks. The rest is pop, as your pap, fluff, softballs, news stories recast as editorials, whatever. The Post about 2 months ago just quit altogether writing editorials, so it's kind of a wasteland out there. But I still go through the Daily News editorial and then any quasi-editorials that might appear on editorial pages. So here's the Daily News today. During election season, it's easy to get caught up in the vision of what everyone hopes to accomplish. This season is no different, as we've heard candidates for every race list the goals and projects they will work toward, with many outlining changes they'll make once in office. From streamlining government operations to eliminating lines entirely at Department of Rev Tax to building new schools and a new comprehensive medical complex, the people have heard countless ideas from candidates who promise to make Guam and the government of Guam work better. In short, we've heard it all. Many of these goals and ideas are so good they've been on the ledger of promises for decades. a new Simon Sanchez High campus, a new Guam Memorial Hospital, competitive pay for teachers, police officers, and nurses. The list goes on. But how we see these projects through to fruition is a much more complex process than what is included in the campaign rhetoric. What rarely comes to light in the discussion phase are the potential roadblocks, the challenges of funding sources, or getting the majority of the legislature's 15 senators with different agendas to agree are just the tips of the bureaucratic iceberg. The ancestral landowners of Eagle Field. Wrong. Who do not exist. There's no such thing as ancestral landowners of Eagles Field, but the Daily News keeps pandering and building false hopes. Can attest to this as the families and heirs. You know, an heir, let's talk about the definition of an heir. An heir is someone who would take part of a decedent's estate according to the rules of intestacy.
So it's not entitlement or automatic.
It's not entitlement or automatic. And the person's heirs are people like his spouse, his children, sometimes even his consanguineal relations, etc. But until there is an estate, there's nothing to talk about. There cannot be heirs without an estate.
The HEIR become AIR.
Exactly. The ancestral landowners of Eagles Field can attest to this as the families and heirs of these lands, which currently remain under federal authority. Play with the language much? Currently remain under. Hey guys, the national government owns that land. Now this is where people get their feelings hurt, because they read this stuff and they believe, well, it must be true. It's in the paper, and they build false expectations. Compromise hasn't been easy, and the governor's proposed construction of a hospital in Manila remains just that, a proposal for which millions of dollars and countless of hours have been spent over the course of more than one gubernatorial administration. The governor is once again pushing for the legislature to approve the $550 million Hagatna master plan. The renderings for what Hagatna could be are just as beautiful as they were when the plan was first presented to the people in the previous administration. But the challenges remain the same. Perhaps GovGuam could focus on overcoming the obstacles of breaking ground for a new hospital before taking on the revitalization of the capital. Well, here's a thought. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an effective, efficient operation that furnishes basic governmental services in accordance with the rule of law on at least a break-even basis. Don't come to me with all of these high-flown ideas, et cetera, et cetera. The kinds of projects that you're talking about here are best left to private industry. We just need a government that provides basic government services and does it well, and does it on at least a break-even basis. In other words, so we don't have to borrow to provide government services. And we've been in that situation before also. Okay, I got to pick up once again on this, give the land back to the original landowners. And the crime. It's not really a crime, but the meanness involved with those who are pandering to these folks who own property that was taken by the national government, the continued building of false hopes that these people may someday get their land back. So here is a letter from a guy named Frankie Lujan. He says, letter, new medical complex, not prudent. Full disclosure, I am an heir to one of the properties in the Route 15 Latlo, Manilo area. He's an heir. Well, go back to what I just mentioned about heirs. To answer this question, we would first have to ask ourselves if building a, quote, medical complex is feasible, financially prudent, and sustainable. Although Governor LG has not provided the public tangible architectural engineering plans of revision, She has articulated that the medical complex would incorporate consolidating several government departments and agencies, the hospital, Department of Public Health and Social Services, Veterans Affairs, doctors' offices, the Chief Medical Examiner's Office, and a medical educational campus. No studio for tall tales, folks. The governor stated she wants to build a medical complex on ancestral, federally held property. Let's see, ancestral, federally held property.
Is that how it's written over there in D.C.?
Yeah, ancestral federal property. So it really belongs to the ancestral owners. I don't know what the national government thinks they're doing with it. There are all these papers they filed in court, and it's just really disappointing. Ancestral federal property. The estimate provided by the governor's office to build a medical complex is approximately $700 million. Realistically, the cost is more in line with estimates running well over $1 billion, as power, water, and sewer infrastructures also need to be constructed to accommodate the complex. Further, I'm not sure if the governor's estimates include outfitting the hospital and other departments and agencies with equipment essential for their operations. Given the billion-dollar price tag for this complex, the money that would be required to pay for it would in effect require the government to raise income taxes, property taxes, and business taxes to generate revenue to pay the billion-dollar price tag. The increase in taxes will cause the private sector to pass on the increase by raising the prices of commodities sold and services rendered. This will place a heavy burden on Guam residents, making living on Guam even more difficult. During a landowners meeting, okay, now what landowners? That would have been people that own property on Guam, I guess, right? Called by the governor on October 17, the governor's staff told the landowners that the government of Guam's Chamorro Land Trust Commission has a lot of government land. These lands held by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission are not held by the military or the federal government and are not owned by individual property owners, unlike ancestral lands, right? In other words, there would be no need to lease property from the military or federal government, and more importantly, no objection from ancestral landowners. Oh, I think that's what they mean by the landowners. These people that owned the land before it was condemned by the national government and still want to come along and say, we are the landowners. The federal government, the national government just has charge of it now, but it's not right. In correspondence from the federal government to the government of Guam, several condemned military and federal government-held properties were identified as eligible for return to Gov. Guam. This includes the Eagles Field and surrounding properties. The properties identified in this letter would then be classified as excess lands. Guam law requires that excess lands returned by the military and federal government be transferred to the Ancestral Lands Commission. The Ancestral Lands Commission is tasked with the return of excess land to the original landowners or their heirs. Well, I guess you haven't heard about the public law that Congress passed in 2000 that said you can't do that no more.
Big question about even the use of the word landowners. Are there deeds or documentation that say that these people own that land?
No, they're not.
So how do they compile this list?
Well, there are, if you go to the records of land management, if you look at the case files of every condemnation, you find the real property description of the property that was condemned.
So the former landowner. Yeah,
the person who owned it at the time the national government condemned. Yeah, they're former landowners. It's just part of this pandering myth.
The definitions are important.
Exactly.
Names are important.
And it's Orwellian, the way people have, their minds have been played with this new vocabulary, ancestral landowners, on and on and on. To avoid the possibility of Eagles Field and surrounding properties being returned to the landowners, Governor Leon Guerrero plans to lease the properties from the federal government to circumvent Guam law requiring the law to be returned to the original landowners or their heirs. From an investment standpoint, imagine that, building $1 billion complex on leased property. Happens all the time, folks. I wonder how many fiscally responsible public and private business-minded leaders are willing to follow the government's investment model, knowing that their $1 billion investment sits on land that is not theirs. I don't think that's important anymore, who actually owns the land. It's once again, it's the systemic racism. It's not who owns the land, it's the narrative that really counts, and who the narrative says owns the land. Given the aforementioned building, the complex would not be feasible, financially prudent, and sustainable. The people of Guam would be best served by the governor scaling down her plans and instead renovating and upgrading existing aforementioned departments and agencies and build a hospital on government Guam-owned land at a cost within our financial means. This should include adequately staffing and sustaining the facilities. Well, he's half right. You know, I agree with half of what he says. But the other part of his letter really should be started with the immortal words, once upon a time, because it's a fairy tale. Okay, next we've got Lee Weber's column here, which once again ran in the Daily News. It's the only thing close to an editorial. Let's take a short break here.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here's Lee Weber. Lee Weber's been, week after week here, he's been really grinding on the politicians. And here's what he says today. Last week we were paying close attention. If we were paying close attention, we all witnessed two questionable administrative behavioral issues. First, the administration's excuse for not participating in the University of Guam's historically significant event, the Great Debate scheduled for November 3. Second, the timing of a recent visit by the Hawaii Veterans Administration offices. We'll look at the Great Debate question first and the Veterans Administration second. Sadly, the current administration used the excuse that since their political competitors weren't willing to participate in their personally scheduled debates, they wouldn't participate in the historically significant UOG Great Debate. By refusing to participate in the politically neutral Great Debate, they denied the voters of Guam the ability to see them aggressively debate their competitors on neutral ground. Now, one of the debates that Felix and Tony Atta waved off was the Guam's Women's Chamber of Commerce. Now, somebody over there at the Guam Women's Chamber must have had a great sense of humor when they proposed that, you know. It's, you know, it's like a Christian deciding that he's going to go to the gladiator fights with a lion. The debate has been the bellwether for final results in gubernatorial elections since 1994, the past 28 years. But due to what this writer considers childish and self-serving behavior, it was canceled due to the fact that the sitting governor refused to participate. In doing so, she denied the people the opportunity to see her debate competition and answer the tough questions concerning her administration's platform and operations in an open forum just days prior to the general election. Children do such things, not mature, responsible adults, especially those who are in or are seeking critical leadership positions. Behavior of this nature definitely brings into question how they view their individual responsibilities to be open and candid with the voters as they place their individual bias before their elected responsibility to the very people who place them into office. This was an example of open government at its worst. Secondly, last week's Veterans Community Health Care Clinic advertised by the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration comes right on the heels of the recent visit by the Deputy Director of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and just 2 weeks prior to the general election. Both VA events, which while needed, are politically questionable at best, given this administration has had 4 years to make something like this happen for our island and regional veterans. Being a bit of a cynic, someone who naturally believes that people are motivated by self-interest or being distrustful of human sincerity and integrity, my tendency is to question the reasoning and timing for this sudden interest in the veteran community. That said, as a disabled veteran myself, I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to meet with the visiting Veterans Affairs representatives and their staff to share my thoughts and feelings about the existing local care provided and earned by our veterans, as well as to register for the new Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act. This gathering gave Vietnam era veterans such as myself the ability to register for the new PACT. It offers expanded coverage for veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, as well as adding those newly included for potential Guam exposure to this deadly toxin. It also offers veterans expanded disability coverage opportunities. Since I only attended the last day of the event, there's no way for me to gauge how things went on the first 2 days. However, I later learned that the last day may have been the busiest of the 3 days. That said, I count during 2.5 hours there were in excess of 70 veterans in attendance in the administrative room alone. A few days later, I was informed that it was the busiest of the 3 days during the entire time the event was held. The event brought Devin Woods, Associate Director for VA Public Islands Healthcare, with some 30 other people from Honolulu to Guam. Their goal was to hold small screening clinics, administer needed vaccines, and conduct various examinations. They also interviewed registered veterans and assisted previously unregistered veterans in registering with the VA. They were also set up to register eligible veterans for the new PACT Act. The intent of the event was good, but sadly long overdue. As mentioned earlier, it seemed questionably timed given the upcoming elections and the administration's desire to garner the veteran vote. The weak link for an otherwise good event was the apparent lack of planning, particularly when it came to internet communication capability and the anticipated level of attendance. The local coordinators didn't ensure the team had proper high-speed internet drop lines available so they could rapidly deal with veteran needs. Additionally, it appeared that the visiting team didn't adequately communicate with local coordinators on communications needs as well. For PACT Act eligible veterans, this was rectified by having Command Sergeant Major Panini. Yeah. I guess this was kind of some of the bread that was passed out at the event.
Remain in pressed for information.
Yeah. Remain in Guam for extra 30 days. If you or any eligible veterans have not registered for the PACT Act, take the advantage of this opportunity. According to Guam VA representatives, another event of this nature has been scheduled to happen again in about 4 months. Let's learn from both these events. There is still time to hold a great debate. The work has been done at the school, and the candidates should know their storylines. Make it happen, and let's make Guam great again. Yeah, well, Lee Weber really called her out this time, didn't he? Good for you, Lee. It was deserved. Okay, I've got somebody here in the green room. That would be Senator Chris Duenas, and he wants to throw his agreement in with Lee Weber. Go for it, Chris.
Have a day, Your Honor, Senator, Honorable Marine, my favorite talk show host. Lee nailed it.
Yes, he did.
You know, it's kind of interesting, Your Honor. This has really been the feedback in all the campaigning that I've been doing. And what's interesting is, even with politicians, which at the Camacho Ada rally, Governor Calvo and others, kind of pointed to this, was that it's really not even about the candidates. Truth be told, the opportunity is absolutely the people who missed this final closing argument to be able to make a decision, on who has the better ideas and who's forward thinking and who is accountable for the record. I have a suspicion on why, at least one suspicion on why the governor's team decided to pull out of this, though. I think you may have had the same front row seat to the debate at the Hilton that I had several months ago.
Yeah.
And I thought that Governor Camacho was extremely skillful in doing what I think was deserved by debating Governor Leon Guerrero, not based on her team's attempts to discuss his 8-year record, but this is a referendum on her 4-year record. And when I go around and I talk to people, their concerns are about the last 4 years. And so I think the effectiveness of Governor Camacho, I think he was very skillful. I think his closing was remarkable. And I think that if all attempts by the opposition to try to tie a completely different time without billions of dollars of assistance and a much different condition and time, and even with those limitations under Governor Camacho being able to creatively build 4 schools and break the ground on John F. Kennedy, assembling the civilian military task force, which was designed for Build Up 1, and actually ended up being managed by former Lieutenant Governor and military man, Dr. Mike Cruz, along with other key cabinet members who were very experienced. And we were actually going to be ready for Build Up 1, Bob.
Uh-huh.
Because there were 12 committees that were put together throughout the entire vastness of what would be required. Public safety, education, the Port Authority of Guam. I fortunately sat on the public safety one, and I chaired. Myself and the Port Authority of Guam were actually the only, other than the major conferences in the beginning, were the only ones to have their standalone conference with all of the federal partners come to Guam, and we held it down at the Westin. They had their individual one in public safety. That's how concerned the national government was. They had everyone, all hands on deck to deal with those key issues. And the successive committees were going to have meetings after that. But then subsequently, within a year of that, there was an announcement that it would be pared down to what we now know as Build Up 2. But I have always told Governor Camacho, and we've talked about this so many times, that between the building of the schools and his assembly of his cabinet, under the civilian military task force preparing for the buildup were his signature accomplishments. And there was not one dime, and this can be researched and it's absolutely true, there was not one dime of federal money. Governor Camacho did that by commanding all of his agencies to come together and prepare for that buildup. And it was all done with local resources. Hundreds of meetings were held. And there's work product on the shelves of every single department and agency in the government in preparation for mitigation. In fact, the 4 pillars at the legislature came out of Governor Camacho negotiating, as well as some well-meaning members of the legislature and some resolutions that were passed to basically prepare for the groundwork. These are his signature accomplishments, alongside going to Washington after the disasters that he walked into. And we had a horrible relationship, Bob. I think you remember this.
I do.
We had so much question costs. We had millions of dollars that the government of Guam was going to have to pay back for so much question costs of prior disasters. And Governor Camacho spent so much time in Washington repairing all of those relationships. And it's one of the reasons why we have the relationship with the national government that we have right now, and the accountability. Remember when Governor Camacho came in, the public auditor also first came in, and that's when Department of Education books were deemed unauditable. And that's why we have the receiver that we have over there that we're trying to get rid of now at some point based on a review of our accountability. All these things originally happened under Governor Camacho's time. So their misstatement of certain things of his record is really just a distortion. But I thought he was so artful, and would have been completely artful if this debate were to take place, to say, listen, we are here today to discuss the last 4 years and plans going forward. And I think that that's what their team, in my opinion, humble opinion at that, is not prepared for and could only lose.
Well, you know, if you are running for office, a general principle is that anytime you can find a couple of people standing around, you want to get your soapbox out and you want to talk to them. You want to take that opportunity to spread your message. And I would think that would go in spades for the governor, who has 4 years worth of giving things away as part of her message.
Right.
But when she says she doesn't want to do it, that brings forth the attitude of she's trying to hide something, she's embarrassed about something, she can't hold her end up, she's afraid of Felix. Nothing but negative emotions come out of it. And then well, you guys did it first. That's nonsense. Just plain nonsense.
I think the main reason why that's nonsense, Bob, is because you and I have been, I've been to at least 5 great debates. And I will tell you something, as far as I'm concerned, that is the most neutral, objective, and as far as I'm concerned, the most, you get them, I mean, it's raucous, yes, but as far as the questions and everything else and the way that debate is managed, I think that of all of the opportunities to have a debate, that is the debate, to me, that has the most benefit to the public, and not just in the answers, but how you operate under stress, which is really what that job's all about. Because the atmosphere and everything else, that is an extremely stressful event. And I know that you know this. Campaigns have been won and lost on debates, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the debate that's the most fair.
Well, Chris, you said it's fair, it's objective, it's even-handed. So why would the governor want to go there? when she'd much prefer the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, right?
Yeah. I myself didn't do that one this year. I did it last year, but I just got tired of answering the "Are you for abortion?" question.
Yeah.
I had enough of that. I said absolutely not, and I had to say it several times.
Yeah.
Because I'm not.
Well,
and I'm never going to be. And I figured that all the other questions were just window dressing for that question.
Absolutely. It's an organization that Lou herself started, controls in her pocket, etc. It's, we already have a Chamber of Commerce. One would think that women, looking for equality, wouldn't want to self-segregate themselves from the major action at the Chamber. But, and of course, that's the reason that she's not going to debate in the Great Debate. Well, you guys wouldn't go before the Women's Chamber. Therefore, we're not going to do any debates at all.
Well, and that's why I was trying to say that for their team to say, we don't want to accommodate our opponents only in a form that you're most comfortable in, I would be the most uncomfortable, to be honest with you, at the Great Debate, because that everything's on the line. It's within days of the election, and as far as I'm concerned, like I said, it is the most. I mean, every time I've ran for office, I've gone to the UOG, the senatorial forum, basis of that, and that's not easy either. I mean, it really. I mean, they have really strict rules. They ask direct questions. And, those students are serious about what they're doing, and a lot of people do attend those things. So that's a tough forum. I mean, you're not going – it's very neutral, and it's not friendly to any particular individual unless you can put your platform down and answer questions that seem to be that you know what you're talking about and you have some ideas. But I think that excuse in particular to me doesn't resonate, because to me that's the most uncomfortable forum for either. And I know that gubernatorial teams go through weeks of debate prep for that particular debate just because of the fact that everything's on the line. Yeah. So I think that's a poor excuse, but my grandmother used to say a poor excuse is better than none.
True enough. Well, I think you and Lee nailed it on the Great Debate, Chris. So thanks.
Right on, Your Honor. Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents on this because I was looking forward to being there and hearing the debate and of course. I'll be honest, I made up my mind. I'm voting Camacho Ada, but I certainly think the people of Guam deserve much more. Thank you.
True enough, Chris. Thanks for calling. Okay, we got to take a short break here.
Up a day, I'm Senator Chris Duenas. We've gone from a viral pandemic to a drug epidemic. It is time to stand up the multi-agency unified law enforcement group to stem the flow of drugs and combat crime with force. MAULIC is not just another task force, it is a program focused on stopping the distribution of meth and opioids, as well as placing enough police officers patrolling our streets. It is time to make Guam MAULIC again.
Re-elect Senator Chris Duenas. The fight continues.
I am Chris Duenas, and I approve this message.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So here we are. We got about 8 more minutes up till the big halftime show. And I'm going to go back to Helen Middlebrook's letter yesterday, her column where she mentioned awareness can still mean inaction. And she's talking about foster children. And she said, you have to do more than be aware of what's going on. You got to do something about it. And then she mentioned Bill 299-36, the public hearing that she went to, and she said that only 3 senators were there and 1 was in and out most of the time. And I said, taking a page from your own book, Helen, what you need to do then is you need to tell us who wasn't there. That's how we take action. Just gliding over and saying, well, 2 senators were there and the rest weren't. Doesn't bring about any change in behavior, attitude. So I got a nice letter from Helen today, and I'm going to use this for the obvious purpose, and I'm also going to use it as a lesson and how to work with the Freedom of Information Act, or also known as the Sunshine Law. Helen says Speaker Tetlahi was there because she's head of the committee that heard the bill. Now, here's how the committees work at the legislature. The committee chairs are chosen by the majority. So after the votes are counted, the majority will get together and they'll do a lot of horse trading to decide who gets what committee. They'll put together committees on an ad hoc basis to take advantage of the likes, dislikes, skills, and weaknesses of the members. And once those committee chairs are chosen, then each committee chair chooses the membership of his or her own committee from amongst the other members. If a person doesn't want to serve on a committee, if a senator doesn't want to serve, he doesn't have to. If he does, he can. Committees hold meetings. Almost never do committees hold meetings. Hearings, very seldom meetings, very seldom markups, etc. And there's nothing that compels a member of a committee to show up. You could be a member of the XYZ committee and skip every single meeting for 2 years, and you would not be disciplined, spanked, etc., and you wouldn't be criticized. Now, that's where we need citizens groups to ride herd on this kind of thing. You know, kind of common cause approach, so that a citizens group keeps track about who's doing the work and who's not doing the work, who's not even showing up to do the work. On the other hand, a senator can go to any committee, any hearing, whether he is or is not a member of the committee, and will have equal speaking rights with everybody else that shows up for that hearing. My own personal approach was that I've missed very few hearings during the 4 years I was a senator. I found it was the very best way to know what's going on in the legislature, so that when it came time to vote, I didn't have to pass 3 times before I could decide how to vote. Helen goes on to say, Terlahi was there because she's head of the committee that heard the bill. Mary Torres was there because it was her bill. Nelson came in late, listened to a testimony, and left. Missing were Paris, Tello, Barnes, Brown, Duenas, Shelton, Pito Terlahi. There was some discussion that the senators were at some forum and had expected to get back in time, but it ran late. Now, what forum would that have been, I wonder? But the hearing had started at 11:30, closer to 11:45, and I bet they all just went to lunch. Now, one of the really hard questions that come up whenever there's a public hearing, it goes something like this. What time do you think the 10 o'clock public hearing will start? Probably about 20 after. And then we have this custom that the hearing will start, and the chairman will be there, maybe a couple of other members, and the others will come straggling in throughout the proceeding. And as each senator straggles in, the chair will stop and say, oh, we need to pause for a moment and welcome Senator Smucka Huckowitz to this public hearing. Smucka Huckowitz doesn't have a watch or can't tell time, but they're here, so let's welcome them in. Of course, it's really hard to make a grand entrance unless you're late, right? Then Helen goes on to say, I sent my first FOIA to the Department of Health. I'd gone to Vital Statistics to ask to review the permits that are issued to dispose of bodies on Guam. Maria Kitagua in Vital Statistics said they were not public record. Now, I got to tell you something about the open government law. If you read if you read the Sunshine Law and read the definitional section, every single record that the government uses as part of its operations is a public record. Now, there are some public records that the director doesn't have to disclose, but any government official who says, oh, this is not a public record, is talking through his hat, because that just isn't the law. But anyhow, Marie Keeling said they're not a public record. And then she said, I had to talk to the director. I said, either they are a public record or they're not a public record. What's the point of talking to the director? This, of course, is GovGuam, the way GovGuam works, you know. Even if a person at the front desk knows for sure that the document should be released, well, you know, I didn't want to get in trouble, so I had to ask the director. If they aren't a public record, he won't give me permission. And if they are a public record, then I shouldn't have to ask. Common sense. All right, let's break for the big halftime show here. We'll come back to Helen Middlebrook.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A Halloween night mass shooting. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. 14 people shot on Chicago's West Side. Some of them reported to be injured critically.
We know it's a drive-by. We know it happens in just a few seconds. It begins and then it's over by 3 seconds. The car is pulling out after driving by and shooting randomly really into the crowd.
Chicago's police superintendent David Brown, who says there are children among the victims, including a 3-year-old. He says so far they have no motive and no suspects. Gunfire at a Halloween block party in Omaha came from a police officer who opened fire when a driver drove around the barricades and into an area crowded with trick-or-treaters. The wounded driver reported to be in serious condition. Police say nobody in the crowd was hurt. President Biden threatening oil companies with higher taxes unless they do something to lower gas prices.
The profits are a windfall of war.
If oil companies are making record profits and energy markets destabilized by Putin's invasion of Ukraine, President Biden thinks they need to lower prices at the pump. And if not, he's proposing new taxes.
If they don't, they're going to pay a higher tax on their excess profits.
This is a reversal. As President Biden has boasted for months, his energy policies were helping bring prices down. Now, energy executives are monitoring a potential shortage of diesel fuels, blaming Biden officials for anti-fossil fuel rhetoric.
Fox's Peter Ducey, the man accused of fracturing Paul Pelosi's skull in a hammer attack Friday night, due in court this afternoon to face a list of state charges.
Attempted murder, residential burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, false imprisonment of an elder, as well as threats to a public official and their family.
San Francisco's District Attorney Brooke Jenkins, David Dupop, is likely to face federal charges as well. America is listening to Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
It's now 1 week until the November midterm elections. Millions of people have already cast their ballots.
As of Monday, 21.5 million people had voted early, either in person or by mail, according to the University of Florida's Elections Project. The campaign finance tracking outlet Open Secrets noted in mid-October spending by outside groups had broken a midterm record, more than $1.3 billion spent. Some cash has gone to places you might not necessarily expect. Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee told the Fox News Rundown podcast he doubts Utah voters will go for his challenger, independent Evan McMullin.
We've got two independents right now in the United States Senate. They both caucus with and receive their committee assignments from the Democrats.
Ad Impact says Utah's Senate race is now the most expensive race ever in that state, with more than $16 million spent on ads. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
It's Election Day today in Israel for the fifth time in 3 years in an effort to break a political deadlock in the Knesset. Echoes of the 2020 presidential election as a federal judge rules a lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani will go forward.
Ruby Freeman and Wandrea Shema sued former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, saying he defamed them when he accused the two of committing election fraud in 2020. The lawsuit says Giuliani pushed spurious claims that the pair pulled out suitcases of illegal ballots and committed other fraudulent acts. The two say since then they've been threatened and harassed. Giuliani said the lawsuit should be dismissed because the claims against him are barred by First Amendment free speech protections. The judge in the case rejected Giuliani's argument, allowing the lawsuit to move forward. Sean Angel, Fox News.
The two-day sentencing hearing begins in Florida today for the man who admitted to the mass shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. The sentence won't be a surprise. A jury has decided that Nicholas Cruz should spend the rest of his life in prison. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
I'm Dr. Sam Abini Young. I've always believed in the value of education, effort, humility, and accountability. As your senator, I will prioritize the training and education of students and workers to support the rebuilding of our economy. I understand our community's need for affordable living and housing and the need for aggressive drug enforcement to stop its serious impact. And there's a need for smarter and smaller government, like a part-time legislature that works for Guam and having more efficient GovGuam departments. Please support me with one of your votes for senator to work for you on these issues. I'm Dr. Sam Abini Young.
Paid for by friends of Sam Abini Young, Gina Ramos, Treasurer.
So another great halftime show here brought to you by the Tall Tales Coordination Group led by Jose. Jose does a good job every day. So we're now in the second half of Tall Tales. I'm going to go back to the letter that I got from Helen Middlebrook today where she's talking about the Sunshine Law. Some people call it the Freedom of Information Law. So I'm going to give some pointers here. Helen said she went to Vital Statistics, part of the Department of Public Health and Social Services, and asked to review the permits that are issued to dispose of dead bodies. Maria Ketigua and Vital Statistics said they were not a public record, and I've explained why that is not correct. What's the point of and then she said, Maria Ketigua said, you have to talk to the director. And Helen said, well, why? If they're releasable, I get them. If they're not, I don't. What's the point of talking to the director? Anyhow, so Helen sent a FOIA to ask for a list of permits that have been issued. And on day 4, she received an email saying, we don't keep a list of permits, so we can't give you anything. Well, here's the mechanics of the Sunshine Law. The only thing you can ask for when you do a Sunshine request is a public record. So that should be one of the first words in the sentence that starts here off. I hereby demand all public records, and then a description. And if the public record is available, they got to give it to you, unless it comes within a certain range of exceptions dealing with personnel matters. And I don't want to spend enough time to explain this. It doesn't mean anything that's got somebody's name in it. And it doesn't mean what Rory thinks it means. Oh, I'm prohibited. I'm prohibited from this because it's a personnel matter. But when you ask for the public record, the custodian either has to give you the public record or tell you why he is not giving you the public record. Now, there are some public records that the director has discretion. And if he has discretion, then the reason he's not giving you the records is because he doesn't want to. It's not because he can't. That is not part of the law. So you want to ask for a public record. You want to describe it in such a manner that anyone who reads it would know what you're after. But the government is under no obligation whatsoever to prepare anything for you. So if you're after, if you want to review permits that issued to dispose of bodies, then you need to set a time range. You need to say all permits issued to dispose of dead bodies between the dates of January 1st and the current date or whatever you're after. You can't, if you ask for a list and they don't have the list, they don't have to prepare it and they don't have to give it to you. That's the way the statute works. Now, here's another angle, and that is the statute says that you can inspect any public record at any time. So, Helen, what you can do, you can go to the Office of Vital Statistics and say, I want to see every permit that issued this year, and I want to see them now. And they have to show them to you. It's not any, we're too busy or come back tomorrow, etc. Now, I've done this on more than one occasion, and in order to make it easy on myself, not make it easy on them, I'll usually give them a day or two notice. I'll send an email saying, I'm coming to your place at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and I want to see all burial permits. So please have them ready when I get there. Your pal, Bob. And they have to show them to you. And if they don't, then they are violating the law. And I think everybody knows that a willful violation of the Sunshine Law can cost the violator $1,000. It's happened before. So that's my advice on that subject, Helen. And please keep pursuing it. The thing that makes the Sunshine Law work is people using it. If no one uses it, people think it's not important, they'll forget about it, etc. So we need to have people asking for public records repeatedly and all the time in order to make sure that government employees don't fall asleep on us on that one. Okay, next we're finally going to get to the card. I notice I got somebody in the green room here trying to get on the air. Okay, it's Ken. Maybe Ken can tell us about some of his own experiences with Sunshine Law requests. Go ahead, Ken.
You are absolutely right, Judge. You have to be very specific in your documentation. And I find in my FOIA request, I quote the law in the FOIA request just to remind the people. You also need to address your FOIA request to the person in charge of the agency. You know, a couple of times I've had FOIA requests denied because I addressed them to someone who was no longer there, and that's why they denied it. And you're right, you need to put a range in there, you know, because I've had FOIA requests come back say the information you're requested is too broad. We are unable to comply. So those are all excellent tips, but even then you still have a hurdle. I have a FOIA before Guam Memorial Hospital now. The council has determined that much of the information I am requesting is discussionary in nature, therefore they don't have to release it according to the FOIA law, even though the FOIA law doesn't have any exclusion for discussionary in nature. But then it's an interpretation. How is invoices discussionary in nature? How are RFPs for meeting rooms at hotels discussionary in nature? How are reports that have been bought and paid for, work product paid for by the taxpayers, how are those discussionary in nature? So I went to court after a vote. Now, bear in mind, I'm already down almost $400 in this effort, and so I went to file a motion to have the judge weigh in on this matter, and they want $250 more. So that's the big challenge for citizens. You know, if we stand up and we pursue the law, you know, I've talked to attorneys, they want $3,500 retainer, and they will refund the difference. Some want $5,000. So that's why I do 99% of my stuff pro se, and most of the time I get where I need to go. But, you know, just because an attorney decides that something's discussionary in nature and is not going to release it, now I'm looking at 2 to 3 weeks and another $250 of expenditure. So that's the caveat right there for people. It says a lot about the administration, because during Calvo's administration, I very rarely ran into resistance on a FOIA. Under this administration, every single FOIA I've issued in the past 3.5, almost 4 years, has been met with opposition. They drag their feet. They question me to death. You know, you've requested these invoices. Could you be more specific in your description on what invoices you want? You know, and then they drag the clock out. So, I mean, I've had some FOIA requests that go like 3 or 4 months to complete.
I have a quick question, since you characterized the two different administrations, and we know sometimes there's trickle-down instructions from the executive. Would it be too much to ask for a FOIA of any FOIA communications? Maybe, you know what I mean? Because that's very interesting.
That's interesting. That's a real interesting
That's all.
question. Because, I mean, I've had to have the judge issue orders to the governor, to Lillian Posadas, to Steve Ignacio, and now they are refusing to pay my expenses. So now I'm issuing another motion, and now the judge is giving them 30 days to justify why they don't want to pay my expenses.
Let me interrupt, Ken. What do you mean by your expenses?
My filing fees, my service fees, my notary fees,
costs,
my copy fees, the cost.
Yeah.
The cost. I'm pro se, so I don't have any attorney fees.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I used an attorney, they billed the FOIA bad boy $5,500 in fees. You know, but I'm not the attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I can't write an invoice for myself, but I can claim my documented expenses.
Well,
which
you can claim
tend to run around.
There's a term of art here. Costs has a definite meaning. And,
Yeah.
and the way you recover costs is you file a bill of costs with the court. But anyhow.
No, that's what I've done.
All right.
And then I got an order that the judge has given the respondent, I forget, 21 days to respond as to why they should not be required to, the agency should not be required to reimburse me for my costs. So,
Okay.
you know, that's the issue right there. But it is the most powerful tool. And right now, this administration, this attorney general are working hard to strip citizens of our power, because I took a case all the way to the Supreme Court of Guam, and the ruling of the Supreme Court of Guam is a taxpayer cannot file a lawsuit on the basis that taxpayers were erroneously spent or fraudulently spent unless they can point to how their specific tax, they were injured specifically. So the fact that, you know, in the case of Bill 30, you know, we estimate that somewhere the taxpayers of Guam lost $30 to $40 million by the time that bill was overturned in district court. The fact that I cannot point to an individual harm, you know, that's something that needs to be addressed by the legislature to close that loophole there.
You've probably heard me talk about Frothingham versus Mellon on the show before. That doctrine of standing goes all the way back to the 1920s, and I'm afraid our Supreme Court just can't get shed of it. I don't know if a statute could possibly overcome the judicial hostility to litigants who don't have injuries in fact, but it's worth a try.
Yeah, it's worth a try. I just didn't have the money to take it to the next level. You know, defending our rights as citizens is a time sensitive process. You have certain dates that you can act once you get into the process, and then, you know, it's a very, very expensive venture to do. You know, I'm not the American Civil Liberties Union or any other organization that has a lot of money. I'm a senior citizen on a fixed income. So there's limitations to what I can do. And I mean, getting it all the way to the Supreme Court, you know, I consider that really good. It's just like what you said, you know, the judges there or the view here is not in the best interest of the taxpayers of Guam. But the way they referred to the loophole in the Guam law, I think it's worth pursuing there, because they cite in their decision, you know, that the legislature did not intend, because of this wording is not in the laws. Well, that sounds like it's an easy fix right there. But when we look at all the big corruption cases that have been addressed, 90% of them started through citizens doing a FOIA process. You look at, you know, like Guam YTK, look at GRRP and other things, Chamorro Land Trust, and many other big public scandals where politicians and executives within government of Guam were abusing their power and authority in a way that cost taxpayers and citizens assets and money. The majority of them started through a citizen complaint and many times through a FOIA. That's what we've got going on right now with, I don't know if you were going to be talking about the Pacific Island Times story, but there's been some new developments.
Yeah, that'll be, as soon as I get to the card, and I'm going to start, that'll be the first item on the card, Ken. One more thing on the Sunshine Law, and that is that don't forget that you don't have to send an email or a letter or something. You can go to the agency and say, I want to see these papers and I want to see them right now.
Well, after you instructed me on that a couple of years ago, I have used that technique several times. Catches them by surprise. They start out with the standard, oh, you can't do that. You can't come in here and look at records. And I carry a copy of the Sunshine Act of 1999 with me at all times. And then I laid down there and said, have you read this? Oh, well, no. Well, here, look, right here. Read this section right here. Oh, I'm going to have to talk to the director, but he's out to lunch. I'll wait. I carry a book with me at all times. The I'll wait usually catches them by surprise. And then they say, oh, well, Mr. Young Girl, it's not that we're doubting you, but we need to talk with legal counsel, before they give me access to the documents I want. But eventually, I would say in 90% of the time, I do get to what I need to see. Sometimes it just takes a while. But again, I want to draw the difference. It comes from the top. Because during the Calvo administration, I never had any resistance to any FOIA request whatsoever. And many times, I would call and ask different people, could I get this or do I need to send you a FOIA? 99% of the time say, oh, no, we'll get that to you by 2 o'clock. Compared to this administration, where if I ask them, what time is it? They'll say, oh, we can't tell you.
We got to check with the director.
Need to know. You have no say.
Yeah. Okay, well, Ken, good on you, and keep up the good work. It's citizens like you that keep the government functioning the way it ought to keep functioning.
Well, I look forward to hearing the card.
Yes, sir. Okay, I've got Repeat who wants to talk about his brilliant victory, I think, next. Is that correct, Repeat? You want to talk about your brilliant victory?
Well, it's not really a brilliant victory. Justice prevailed. The AG should never have brought this case. But I really wanted to complain that, this is my 4th acquittal in a row, and for my office, we've had 7 acquittals in a row. So, I'm calling to complain that they're making it way too easy for us.
Okay.
So, we got to get with the program. It's no fun anymore when we just keep winning without any resistance, But the real,
Pete, those ducks can't swim very far in the barrel, can you? Can they?
No, they can't. But I'm being sarcastic, obviously, but the point I want to drive home is that this AG is just really incompetent and inept, and he's got to go.
Well, I'm ready, and I had high hopes that Doug Moylan would be able to take him out, but it looks to me like you're going to take Doug Moylan out.
Well, I want to take both of them out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I believe that it's within reach. I don't believe it's impossible. I don't believe it's a impossible mission. I believe it's within reach. So. But anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about. Welcome back to Guam, and glad to hear you back on the radio.
Okay, good talking to you, Pete. So long. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field in the 7th inning stretch.
Update, I'm Senator Chris Dueñas. We've gone from a viral pandemic to a drug epidemic. It is time to stand up the multi-agency unified law enforcement group to stem the flow of drugs and combat crime with force. MAULIC is not just another task force, it is a program focused on stopping the distribution of meth and opioids, as well as placing enough police officers patrolling our streets. It is time to make Guam MAULIC again.
Re-elect Senator Chris Dueñas. The fight continues.
I am Chris Dueñas, and I approve this message.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all 3. 671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Okay, so here we are, big seventh inning stretch, and we're back at Wrigley Field where we visit every day for the seventh inning stretch. Next item on the card is Pacific Island Times versus Guam Memorial Hospital. And I picked this up yesterday. Marvik Kagarangan had an article in yesterday's Pacific Island Times. GMH retains consulting firm for $2.4 million. It was a lot of numbers, a lot of figures, not a whole lot of impact. And then today she came back with a second article saying Guam Memorial Hospital's contract with MedHealth Solutions provides that the contractor will receive 12% for amounts collected above the hospital's projected monthly collections of $7.2 million. Okay, so this is kind of what Ken alerted us to yesterday, that once you go over the 7.2 threshold, even if the collection agency doesn't have to make a single phone call, if everybody pays, comes in and writes a check and pays, they get 12%. So, such a deal. MedHealth's payments are contingent on collections exceeding the estimated projections, at which point it will receive 12% of the amounts in excess of that projection as a contingency, Hansen said. According to the contract, a copy of which was made available by GMH today, MedHealth will also be compensated 30% of any dollar collected for any unbilled, uncollected, or denied claims that GMH refers to the contractor for which the contractor obtains payment on behalf of GMH. So it's just like Ken said. If they actually collect the money, they get 30% of it. If the money is just paid in, they get 12% of it. Hansen said GMH contracted MedHealth in May of 2021 to assist with and enhance GMH processes in capturing and collecting patient revenue in accordance with the Healthcare Financial Management Association. MedHealth also provides guidance and training to GMH staff to develop the hospital's capability to sustain its revenue cycle management services on a long-term basis, Hansen said. Well, they must have had a really smart guy coming up with all those big words and that highfalutin language, right?
It sounds like a Hollywood script for a shakedown.
It does. Hansen said the contract was procured through a request for proposals, which was thoroughly reviewed and approved by the Attorney General. The RFP was issued on July 10, 2020, and there's a copy of the contract in Pacific Island Times if you want to take a gander at it. So I got a couple folks in the green room here. I've got Ken LG, and then somebody who's just chiming in. So we'll go to Ken LG for an update on the Med Farm thing. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was talking with Harvey Egna, who was in the collections business, and he enlightened me with a number of pieces of information. So I went to Rev and Tax today and discovered that MedHealth Solutions is not licensed to do collections. In fact, in their revised corporate charter, paragraph number 3 says that the MedHealth Solutions is licensed to do anything, will do anything under Guam Limited Liability Corporation laws except banking and finance. And collections falls under banking and finance. So I went over to the banking and finance window. They knew nothing about MedHealth, and they told me that I would need to go back to Rev and Tax, to the Business License Division. So I went to Business License Division, found out they have a business license for consulting, and it's expired. So they don't even have a business license. They don't have a license to do collections, and there's a whole bunch of federal requirements and processes that a collection company has to go through, and I learned that from Harvey too. And it doesn't appear that MedHealth Solutions has gone through any of them, because there's a due diligence aspect that takes place as part of granting a license to do collections, and it's very extensive, and it requires a lot of documentation on the principals and the executives, financials, and bonding. None of that is available. So as far as we can tell, none of that exists because it's not part of the government records. So to really do my drill down, I went to the license address, the business license address, which is also on the checks and the invoices that are circulating from Guam Memorial Hospital. And there is no office there. I went to every single door in that building. 90% of them are Department of Public Health. You have Joe St. Augustine's office. You have the Medical City Referral Office, and you have a optical shop. But there is no Med Health Solutions office in this building, or if it is, it's got access.
Ken, is there a broom closet in there anywhere?
If it is, it's inside the government of Guam office spaces. So why would we be boarding a company inside the government of Guam that we're paying $2 million a year or more? Now, bear in mind that $2.4 million just covers the period between August and December. You know, it could be a hell of a lot more. And so when we look at the contracts and all the red flags that are already in the contracts, the fact that they don't have a business license, they weren't vetted and cleared through banking and insurance, which is the agency of revenue and tax that authorizes the issuance of a collection license to make sure that they're in compliance. This is a very serious risk to taxpayers, because what if this company actually tries to do collections but isn't doing it properly and the information leaks? Well, when information leaked on banks, they got tagged with millions of dollars of fines because of improper handling of confidential information. So since we don't know who these people are, we don't know where these people are, they don't have a business license, they don't have a physical address, they don't have any due diligence reports, there's no investigation, there's no bonding to protect the government of Guam. This story gets worse and worse for taxpayers, and the reason why we as citizens need to be very, very careful. And I wish there were 100 people out there doing FOIAs every day. No telling what we could come up with, but all this stuff came out of a FOIA. And now we're looking at millions of dollars being siphoned off Guam Memorial Hospital. That's millions not being used to restock the pharmacy, buy new equipment, or do repairs, or pay staff. So this is a very serious problem, and it just keeps getting worse the more information we learn.
Ken LG, this Jose again. Can you remind us who signed that contract?
Governor Leon Guerrero, which is another oddity. In all the hundreds of documents I've FOIA'd from autonomous agencies, they have always been signed by the head of the agency. So John Beneventi signs the contracts with GPA. And up until recently, Lillian Posada signed all the contracts for Guam Memorial except for this one. This one was signed by the governor. So that was another oddity that raised this up to a high level for me. When the governor is signing contracts for autonomous agencies, what's the point in having autonomous agencies? And this is the only one I've run into in 15 years where a governor has signed a contract for an autonomous agency. Now, the fact that this address is the address that public health moved to when they lost their building because they had a ventilation fan burn up and cause smoke damage in a few rooms, and that was the justification to abandon a 100,000 square foot government facility and move into another facility on I guess it was a sole source notice, because I don't remember seeing an RFP for office space. And now the owners of this building own the company that has this contract.
Tell us about the building, where it is, what's the name of it, et cetera, Ken.
You know the building across from Megabyte, that L-shaped building where Joe St. Augustine's office is? It's 761 South Marine Corps Drive. You have an optical store on the base, on the bottom. You have Joe St. Augustine signed very prominently on the top. And when Dennis Rodriguez was a senator, his office was in there. And now Dennis Rodriguez is in the administration. So the conspiracy mind is spinning on this.
Who is the owner of the building?
Renee Ramos.
Okay.
Who owns Med Health Solutions, and who owns a couple of other companies as well that have the same address, but they're not there.
I wonder if it's possible that they're actually operating out of the 19th floor.
It is very possible.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it just fits. I mean, you know the old saying, as I was walking down the stairs, I met a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today, and he works at Med Health Solutions. So this is a screaming violation of ethics all across the board. But the Ethics Commission is appointed by the governor, and in their 3 years of existence, all they've done so far is they've rented office space, hired an executive director, and they're getting ready to take a trip this next month to Montreal for an ethics convention. But they haven't done anything like heard any ethics violations.
Oh, it's a waste.
So we can't go there. Levin Camacho he signed the contract. So here we have an attorney general who approves a contract that doesn't meet the requirements of Guam law, potentially violates the procurement process because the contract was awarded to a vendor that doesn't meet any of the requirements necessary to be in the collections business and does not even have a valid business license.
Well, Ken wants to...
I say that as of today. As of today, they don't have a valid business license. 8:05 tomorrow, I guarantee you they will probably have a business license.
Once again, Ken, kudos, pat on the back, high praise from Tall Tales for the digging you're doing, and I hope you keep on digging. There's obviously something there, so thank you, sir.
Yeah, every day this story gets bigger and bigger, and now because the hole in the dam is widening, there is more information coming out from sources within the hospital. So I expect this story to continue to develop.
Good for you, Ken. Thanks a lot. Okay, I've got Harvey Egna who wants to talk about the MedFarm kerfuffle or whatever you want to call it, and I've got somebody else in the green room. So I'm going to put Harvey on. Harvey, we got about 4 minutes up until we're going to Churchill Downs. If necessary, I'll let you get back on the mic after Churchill Downs. So what do you want to tell us?
Okay, thanks, Senator. Welcome back. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Ken said about collection agencies are a highly regulated business. And in Guam, they do require a special vetting. If you wanted to start a collection agency, you go for your business license, and they send that over to the Banking and Insurance Commissioner, who has additional requirements before you're allowed to have a business license that lets you actually call people and act as a debt collection agency. Some of those requirements are an examination of your personal finances, as well as quite a substantial financial performance bond. And when I looked at the contract of this collections company, MedHealth, it simply requires a business license. It says nothing about being licensed as a collection agency. There are licensed collection agencies on Guam. But you know what really concerns me, Bob, is that when the hospital sends this supposed agency customers to collect upon, they're sending very confidential information to an entity that's not properly licensed. They're sending social security numbers. They're sending customers' names and addresses and other confidential information. And we're not really sure where that information or how that information is being securely stored. As Ken said, we couldn't find a physical location. And you know, we're not sure if that information is being stored on a personal laptop or file papers on someone's desk in somebody's house, and that's really the concern that I have, is the storage of the personal data of these patients that they're supposedly collecting upon. So I think this is an interesting story that's beginning to open up.
Well, I'm glad you guys are working it, Harvey, and you've had experience in this business yourself, correct?
Yeah, I used to run national collections for Wells Fargo.
Cool.
And I'll tell you, it's a heavily regulated business in favor of the consumer. And I tell you, when I ran this for Wells Fargo, we also outsourced to a lot of agencies. And one of our primary concerns was, how do you secure our customer? Even though we're talking about people that owed money and some of them were, quite severely delinquent, we were very concerned with how agencies secured the customer's data, both physically, the physical security of the agency, but more importantly, the data security of the agency. And I had a team of auditors that went around and checked on these types of things. And it was not unusual for us to pull a portfolio that we had placed with an agency because we weren't satisfied with their data and or physical security. Because in the end, it was the bank that would get sued if something happened, not the podunk agency of Cairo, Illinois.
Sure.
So, that's where really my concern is. But, it seems like they tried to make an end run. Administratively, they tried to make an end run around getting the collection agency properly licensed by declaring themselves as consultants. And consultants are not allowed to collect in Guam. You have to have a business license with a collection agency specialty.
That's very interesting, Harvey. I'm really glad you and Ken are working on this, so keep us informed, okay?
We sure will. Have a good evening, sir.
Thanks talking to you, Harvey. Okay, let's go to Churchill Downs.
Reggae in Paradise. Let's vibe out to some of the hottest Irie vibes on all your playlists. Join the vibes on November 19th at Paseo Stadium. It's on a Saturday, and we have an amazing lineup of artists. Mixed Plate, Bubba B, Fantasia, The John Dank Show,
Still running away.
Kimmy A. Minor, Lickle Jordy, High Water, and Rebel Sojas. Get your tickets now at guamtime.net. What are you waiting for? Presenting sponsors, big thanks to Riga Royal, IT&E, White Claw, GVB, Gasolina, Linda's Diner, and Empire Media and Entertainment. Saturday, November 19th, Reggae in Paradise. We'll see you there.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So we're coming around the bend here at Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. 6 furlongs more, and I'll be crossing the finish line to wrap up another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. Next item on the card is the Election Commission versus signage. And there's a story in today's Daily News. Election Commission lawyer, no power to enforce political ad regulations. A number of unidentified billboards urging motorists to vote for the next Attorney General has brought to light the Guam Election Commission's lack of authority to enforce political advertisement regulations, one of their mandates under the law. Now, this is misleading, so I'm going to explain it. It also prompted questions about freedom of speech during election season. Commissioners addressed a complaint filed against the signs which have shot up around the island. They variously state meth prices are cheaper than ever. Sounds like an advertisement to me, not a political sign, Jose. Somebody's advertising his product. And burglars, thieves, and robbers run rampant, and urge voters to vote in the Attorney General election and choose a safer Guam. There is no identification or contact info listed on the signs. Under Chapter 17 of Title III, Guam Code annotated, any ads of a political nature must contain the address and name of the candidate, committee, party, or person or party that paid for it. Attorney General Leven Camacho's wife, Jennifer Camacho, said she had written to the commission about the issue several weeks ago. She said it wasn't clear whether the signs were directly aimed at her husband, the incumbent, but added, we all have election rules to follow, so I think everyone needs to follow the rules, and we're all required to be responsible for the signs. She said the Department of Public Works had already taken down a number of them that were posted on public property, which was outlawed several years ago. So apparently public property was outlawed several years ago. That's what the sentence is. She said it wasn't clear, as you were. Jennifer Camacho said she had written the commission about the issue several weeks ago. Where is that sentence? She said the Department of Public Works had already taken down a number of them that were posted on public property, which was outlawed several years ago. So no more public property, folks. But several remain standing on private property, which I think is wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she thinks it's wrong. According to the Election Commission's legal counsel, Vince Camacho, there's nothing the commission can do. They have no enforcement power due to an oversight when the law was changed to ban campaign ads on public easements. Campaigners used to have to pay the commission a deposit when posting signs on government property along the roadside. Before, a sign violation would prohibit that person from receiving the deposit for the sign permit, Camacho told commissioners Monday. That's no longer there, because they know they don't pay a sign permit. Now, I want to just stop here and explain what this is really all about, okay? And I've got to, once again, I'm going to have to talk about myself a little bit, because I fought a 20-year battle dealing with these crazy signs. We used to have a law that would permit people to post public political signs on public right-of-ways, along the highways, etc. It was silly. It was an eyesore. You know, we're bringing tourists to our island and we want to show them something like that. It was dangerous. It made no sense whatsoever. So I campaigned hard to have that sign, that law repealed, and it finally was. Tommy Morrison finally took the bull by the horns and got rid of that law, and thank God that he did. The election seasons are so much nicer now with all that junk on the shoulders of the right-of-way. Now, at the same time that we allowed public signs in the right-of-way, we have statute that in effect banned public signs on private property. Now, we don't have laws regulating political signs. What we do have is zoning laws. And if you read the law dealing with political signs, you'll find the word erect. No one shall erect, etc. That's the way it used to read. So if you put a political sign on a lowboy and hold it, drive that truck all over, doesn't matter. It's a totally different undertaking. So during the time that we were posting signs on the right-of-way, the law, as far as private property was concerned, there was a case called Gillio versus some village. I laid this out quite clearly, that said every person could have a sign, like about a 2x3 sign in his front yard identifying his property. And therefore, that could be a political sign. But that was it. And it wasn't a regulation of political signs, it was a zoning regulation. So I wrote a letter to the editor about this at the time we finally got rid of the signs on the right-of-way, and Michael San Nicolas introduced a bill, and he pointed out my letter to the editor, said, you know, we shouldn't put people at risk for violating the zoning law to engage in these political activities. So he changed the law and said you could post political signs on private property and not violate the zoning law. This had nothing whatsoever to do with the $100 deposit that people had to pay when they were posting political signs on the highway. Totally different understanding. So Vince, if you need more explanation on this, give me a buzz and I'll let you know how it goes. I don't know that we could. I think it would probably be unconstitutional to say anybody who wants to post political signs on private property has to give the government money. I don't think that would fly.
Is there a definition for a political sign? Because I think that was in question also, how to define a political sign.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and check the statute, but I suspect probably a loose definition. But again, it's in the zoning law. It's not in the prohibiting speech sign. So, and as I see it, I don't see a freedom of speech dimension because it is a zoning law after all. Campaigners used to have to pay the commission a deposit when posting signs on government property. Before a sign violation would prohibit that person from receiving the deposit for the sign permit. Vince Camacho told commissioners that's no longer there because they know they don't pay a sign permit, and there's no possible way they could or should have to. Under Guam's political advertisement law, any purposefully misleading attack on a candidate is punishable by a fine of up to $5,000. But penalties for other violations aren't outlined in the book. Well, there you go, if that's what you're interested in. Because of the lack of enforcement, the signs were so ambiguous that it was unclear that it would even qualify as political advertising under the law, the commission's attorney said. It's definitely not promoting a person, and it's not saying a vote for or against a certain issue. It's actually promoting a vote. To just go and vote, he said, and signs posted on private property are protected under the Constitution. Democrat Representative and Election Commission Chair Alice Tyron, a former denizen of the 19th floor, requested that legal counsel look into the signage regulations on the books and suggested that ad enforcement be added to the list of issues that the commission needs assistance from the legislature on. I think we ought to revisit a lot of these definitions in the books that probably have been there for a long time. Attorney Peter Santos, who's vying for the AG's office as a write-in candidate, told Pacific Daily News he had nothing to do with the signage, nor did Responsible Guam Political Action Committee that he launched earlier this year. Former Attorney General Doug Moylan, who was seeking a return to his former office this year, said he hadn't paid for the signs and couldn't speculate on who had. It was not obvious that they were put up to benefit his candidacy either, he said. Moylan did chime in that he believed whoever was posting the signs had a right to do so. If you want to take a sign and put, "I don't like the current governor," or "I don't like the current senator," and put it in front of your house, what does the government have to do about regulating it? And I just told you the answer. It's the zoning regulations. You can't erect anything on your private property just because it's political. He added that banning of political signage on public property might be violation of the First Amendment, and he would seek a review of the ban if elected. It goes to the essence of politics, freedom of speech. That political speech is the most protected because it preserves democracy. Sounds like something a Democrat would say. Okay, and then finally, still on the subject of signs, Democrats file complaint over Moylan campaign signs. The Democrat Party of Guam filed a formal complaint against congressional candidate Jim Moylan and his campaign committee over a number of Moylan's campaign signs posted around the island. Federal Election Commission requires campaign signage to list the party responsible for paying for the ad. Attached to the Democrat Party's campaign complaint are photos of Moylan signs that don't appear to have the information clearly visible. Although this seems like a technical issue, it's a clear violation of federal law. The rules for federal elections are different than local rules, and candidates are expected to comply. The fact that the Moylan campaign is not in compliance with federal requirements raises questions about fitness for federal office. Democrat Party Chairman Tony Babauta stated in a release circulated to local media. Circulated from the 19th floor. Moylan on Monday said that any signs that were at fault have since been fixed. Several newly elected signs did appear to have included the necessary disclosure, though older signs bearing the candidate's face had what the senator confirmed were stickers with the information added on after they were elected. All right, well, there's a little bit more to this. I'll pick it up tomorrow, but right now it's time for me to say goodbye to our president. So let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Pelosi attack suspect due in court today. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, and may be asked to enter a plea to a litany of alleged state crimes.
San Francisco DA Brooke Jenkins says David DePape will face a list of charges in court.
Attempted murder, residential burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, false imprisonment of an elder, as well as threats to a public official and their family.
The last charge came from DePape's statement to police of wanting to break Speaker Pelosi's kneecaps. Paul Pelosi is still recovering in a hospital. DA Jenkins said DePape's statements proved to her that this attack was politically motivated.
Fox's Gernal Scott. DePape also faces federal charges for threatening the speaker. She says her husband is making steady progress on what will be a long recovery. 14 people shot in a drive-by shooting Halloween night in Chicago. The victims including a 3-year-old child.
We don't have any motive. We don't have any offender identified. We don't have any conflicts on this corner where it happened.
That's Chicago's Police Superintendent David Brown, who says the shootings took only seconds. Police in Omaha shot and wounded a driver who they say drove around the barricades and into a popular Halloween block party last night. The driver reported to be in serious condition. President Biden calling oil company profits a windfall of war.
Rather than increasing our investments in America or giving American consumers a break, their excess profits are going back to their shareholders, and they're buying back their stock, so the executive pays are going to skyrocket. Give me a break. Enough is enough.
The president calling on oil companies to use their profits to lower gas prices and says he'd call on Congress to impose an excess profits tax if they don't. An oil industry group says the president should stop shifting the blame for price increases and get serious about addressing supply and demand imbalances. America is listening to Fox News.
Favorite host.